Okay, good evening. Welcome to our Wednesday Bible study. Let me just check some stuff, make sure we're got everything going before we jump in, and it looks like we do. YouTube looks good. Facebook, okay. So I also have comments up, so if you're watching and joining this live stream, you're welcome to put your comments on. I'm kind of wondering if they're working because something changed. I don't know, but so please let me know. Go ahead and if you're normally with us and you have my phone number and you shoot a text or something and you don't see me respond to it, let me know because I want to make sure we've got the social aspect and the comments up so I can read them. Okay, so we're continuing in the study of the book of Proverbs, and as we go through this, one of the greatest things about this is, a lot of times we want to know about God. We want to have this knowledge of God. And so how do we make this practical? How do we take this into our lives every day and try to make it something real instead of something I read in the Bible or I'm taught at church and then I go out into the world? And that's why Proverbs is really one of the core books that we have that we can go to, and it really encapsulates the total wisdom of God, Old Testament, New Testament, the fundamental wisdom of God, and how that He can help us be able to handle different problems and things going on in our lives. And so the book is about trying to obtain, not to be a smart, but be wise. Wise to me is not just having this intellectual superiority, but it's having the practicality, the practical knowledge of being able to then respond and interact with life and what's going on around us. So tonight we're going to focus in on the last grouping of Proverbs 26 through 31 and looking at really the wisdom for relationships. This is probably the most vulnerable part of our life. Our lives is the way that we interact with other human beings. You have to live with other human beings. Can't get around it. And you can't live with a bunch of robots that are just like you. We're going to be different. So that automatically means that I'm going to like something you don't. And so we just have to understand that how do you function appropriately with all the different types of people and different diversity of likes, dislikes, and perspectives, and still be able to have a positive, godly type of relationship. And even during confrontations or different things. And so tonight we're going to look at that. And really the first one I think that we're going to dive into is dealing with companions. Before we jump too far, let's go ahead and have a word of prayer and then we'll get started. Our most blessed Father, thank you for this opportunity that we have to be here this evening and to study your word, especially looking at Proverbs. We pray, Father, that as we dive into this study tonight, that we'd be able to have a clear mind and be able to look at ways that we can take these Proverbs and make them something that will guide us and direct us and that we could recall naturally and help us to be wise about the way that we respond and interact with people. We thank you for this book and the wisdom that we can draw from it, and you can help us interact in a healthy, beautiful, peaceful way. We ask this in Jesus' name, amen. Like I said, one of the hardest thing is choosing wise companions. I know my mom, I know every parent, the first thing you do and you get told is, I don't want you hanging out with little Billy. Or you'll hear that. You hear, parents immediately, when I had children, immediately I started looking at the little kids around the neighborhood that were playing with my kids, and I started watching, I don't know, and you could just tell, there's some things with watching it as an adult where our children start to interact, and I started watching this played out, this idea of choosing the right kids your children are hanging out with, right? And how then all of a sudden your kids would come home and they would start saying things, doing things, playing certain ways, and you're going, what? Where did you learn that? Well, that's what we do when we play. Well, what? It's a companion. It starts when we're infants, when we're little, well, not infants, but children. And it doesn't change in a lot of ways. It has a lot to do with choosing the right people. We know this. I mean, there's a lot of things that seems like common sense, but even as adults, when we get older, we think, well, it's not as big a deal for us, but it really is. And so we're going to look at some of the Proverbs, focusing in on looking at that idea of wise companions. And the first one is Proverbs 13:20. One who walks with wise men will be wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. And this is one of the ways of poetry of trying to reinforce, showing kind of the positive and negative. The positive is you hang out with people who are smart, who are wise, you're going to start absorbing that. People who have a lot of common sense, and I'm not talking about education level, but just people who are very good at their trade even. You hang out with people who are smart and good, and you're going to start picking up, well, how'd you do that? And they'll teach you. You hang out with people who are not, you're going to be just like them. And it is that contagious. And people who hang out with people that are fools, guess what? You're going to act and be just like them. And the fool, we know, always suffers harm. In Proverbs 22:24 and 25, don't associate with a man given to anger, or go with a hot-tempered man. You will learn his ways and find a snare for yourself. Can anybody think of some applications with this? I mean, when you're around somebody who is angry, you hang out with somebody, we've all known people who have anger issues, haven't we? Short-fused, short-tempered. One, do you like hanging out with them? Now, some of them may be family members. You don't have a choice.
Yeah, that's true.
But one, this type of a person to me is stressful to be around. I mean, because you don't know what's going to blow their gasket. Sometimes those type of people that are short-fused or, have anger issues, man, I just don't want to be around them because you don't know. I don't know, about 3 years ago, I ran into a man that I thought, and he's a professional. He's retired from the university, and we were sitting around after we went riding, and somebody said something, and this man snapped. Now, it scared us because we'd never seen him do that, but it just kind of reminded me what anger does to begin with. That what set him off was an opinion that he didn't like. And from then on, me and my other friends, and we're all my age, have been on guard with him. We're like, okay, you're on edge. So what happens with people who hang out with people who are angry? Well, it's kind of the same way when you look at the association, when you're hanging out with somebody like that. A lot of times the things that are irritating them and causing them to be short-fused becomes the same things that you do, that irritate you and cause you to become angry and upset. And so you start responding the way they do. And it reminds me of, these young kids who hang out in the wrong group of kids who are violent, hot-tempered, and the kids that they are around, they influence them. They become bullies maybe or whatever it might be. And it's a snare. Because, especially the youth, because they don't necessarily know that that's a dangerous behavior. They don't see that. And sometimes people, it's just that being around that type of an anger, and that's why the hot-tempered man, you'll learn his ways. You see what it says? You will learn his ways. And then when you do that, and you start doing this falls back kind of into how foolish an angry man can be and the damage and the harm that it's going to have. And that's so looking at our companions, we should consider that. I love this 27:17 proverb, I think, is one of the most applicable. If this is one key verse, talking about the influence that we have on one another, is this right here, is iron sharpens iron. So one man sharpens another. Now remember, it's a two-edged sword. Sometimes it can cut both ways. You know, that's not what it's saying here. But what I'm saying is that sharpening can be sharpening in a detrimental way. And that's kind of goes back to, we looked at 22:24. You can learn his ways. When we associate with each other, this is what, now as a Christian, that's why we should associate with each other, because that iron sharpening iron is, we are Christians and we sharpen each other. And so, sometimes maybe my faith is a little dull. And, by being around those who have the faith in God and are Christians, it helps to sharpen me up, whenever I need it. And so the influence that we have on one another. And that's why it's so important for us to think about who's doing the sharpening on you. When we have our relationships. And so when we want to try to apply this, we really should evaluate our relationships. I mean, current relationships. I think if you're old enough, you've had friends in the past. You can look back and you can see some of those relationships and how they changed you. Maybe for the better, maybe for the worse. But I think it is important to look at those and really understand. And when we look at those relationships, is find those that are positive, that are shaping us in the right direction, what we should be doing, and nurture that relationship. Draw closer to those people that have those characteristics, traits that are more peaceful, loving, more Christian, more God-focused. But it does take that. Don't just associate with anybody. I mean, that sounds like a common thought, but sometimes it's difficult. Our relationships in the world is, I think, difficult as Christians anyway, because we cannot live in a bubble. We can't just, all us Christians, crawl into a bubble and live our lives separate from them. We have to be a part of the world, but we cannot let them do the sharpening on us. We have to be the ones, if anything. Another relationship we look at is the parent. Parents, is a very important one, because I really see that the core of a society is around the family. It really does. Children are the future, and how they're raised and nurtured and how they grow up is going to have an incredible impact on society. We are experiencing that in our country right now. And I think that enough said in a way, but I hear about what's going on in the school systems, and then I know what the fractured family looks like from the studies and everything that's going on. And then you see this behavior in the schools, and then all of a sudden you see all the youth violence that's going on. Here in little old Las Cruces, what happened at Young Park, right? I don't know how many were killed in that shooting, and all the guns they said that came out. It's like, where are they learning this? Who's sharpening their iron? It goes back again, though, to parenting and honoring parents, mother and father, and having that type of honor. And so a child needs to learn, that these Proverbs 15:20, where it says, a wise son makes a father glad, but a foolish son despises his mother. We looked at this before, and this is kind of a poetic way, the Hebrew poetry of showing both parents, but a lot of times it's interesting because if you ask somebody who, say had a fairly good relationship with their mother, but if they don't honor them, they're really despising their mother. They'd go, wait a minute, no, I don't despise my mother. Well, you're not honoring her.
That's right.
If you're not honoring her, you're really despising. And when we talk about, a wise son, it doesn't mean, again, that he's got an IQ that's amazing. It's about a child that is making right choices. But of course, we know he has to be, developed and groomed by his parents. Proverbs 20:20, he who curses his father or his mother, his lamp will go out in a time of darkness. So his light, I like this. This is interesting. So the first line states the condition. One who curses the father or the mother, what's going to happen? So what's his lamp? If you think about a light, in the time that he needs it, it says he's not going to have that light. It's going to be dark. This all really, again, ties into even the Mosaic Law when it talked about in the Ten Commandments about children, honoring their mother and father. And that's the first one with promise. Galatians 6 talks about that as well. And how important, and I think it again keeps bringing it back to the importance of the family. And it starts at home. It starts with children who are showing honor to their parents. And it doesn't mean your parent is perfect to get honor. There's a lot of people who, to me, there are some positions in society, like a judge. You call him your honor, right? A doctor. You call him doctor. You give him that honor. He may be a horrible person, maybe, or, the judge, we don't know, but we still call him your honor. We give him that type of a respect, and let them, if they're bad people or whatever, but you give them this honor. And this is the way children, your parents aren't going to be perfect. They're going to make mistakes. We know that, all of us in here that are adults, we see that in our parents, but we still have to give them honor that's due to them as being our parents. And it does have to do with training, parents training your children. In Proverbs 29:15, the rod and rebuke give wisdom, but a child who gets his own way brings shame to his mother. Whew. I've heard some really horror stories about discipline in the school system and the lack of it. And the kids have more rights than the teachers and the school people who are trying to, teach them and educate them, and all the restrictions that are laid on teachers. And a lot of people won't even go into teaching because why am I going to go into that environment where these kids have their own way? They have their own way. Why do they have their own way at school? Because they're having their own way at home. Now, when the proverb writer says rod, he's not talking about beating. It's a figurative, an idiom referring to disciplining. Discipline isn't violence. It isn't, physical punishment. Discipline is training. That's what it is. Discipline can be positive and negative. Discipline is training the person and correcting them and giving them direction and having them do it the right way, whatever it might be, and get them to do it that way. Disciplining them. One who doesn't get this type of discipline, they're out of control. They lose it. In Proverbs 23:22, listen to your father who begot you, and do not despise your mother when she's old. I notice that each time these proverbs that we've just read has the idea of despising your mother when you're not honoring her. This is, this thing. You need to listen to your father. I know that teenagers think their fathers, for some reason, are not very smart until you get older, but you still need to listen. Listen to them. When you become a father, then you can do it your way. That's the way I've thought, for the longest time. It's your time to be responsible, then you can do it your way. You can when you're the father, but we have to give our father and listen to them when they talk to us. And, they've lived it long enough. Most fathers, they have a lot of experience in life. they've either made the mistake or they've seen people make the mistakes and they've seen the results of what the consequences of how they lived in the past. So when we try to bring this in about our parents and applying this, one is children need to strive to honor their parents. You know what? Even adults who have parents, and this is another one where your elderly parents, can we dishonor them? No. There is an aspect, though, that where what's their value any longer? Did they get, children all of a sudden, I've seen some where they almost, in the way that they have their relationship with the very elderly family members, their parents, demean them or not, continue to give them kind of respect. There's a certain level, even though, they're older, you still give them that respect.
That's right.
As frustrating as it might be, that you're now the big adult and they're the old person and they're not listening to you, you know what? Give them respect. Listen to them. And parents, we have to lead by example. If we want honor, we have to live honorable. We have to earn that as well. We cannot demand it. We need to earn the honor as well as parents. So we have to lead by example. So the basic takeaway on all of that is we have to choose our relationships very wisely. And the next one is honor and invest in your family. And if you feel like every time you have a conflict or something with your family, give those people in those positions respect. And you may disagree with them, but there's a level that you can disagree with somebody and not be disrespectful. I think that's the thing. You don't have to agree with your parents on everything, but you have to give them at least that respect. And invest in our family, our children, parents, invest in your children, earn that honor that they're supposed to be given to you. Train them, discipline them so that they don't go out and be the fool, embarrass you. Give them that control. And it's hard. But I guarantee you know what's harder? Harder is whenever your child goes out and gets involved in some horrific event or accident or dies because they were with foolish associates or, they weren't listening to you. You just let them run the gamut and then all of a sudden you're going to their funeral. I mean, why? What happened? What happened? I'm not going to say every child that dies is, a parent, but a lot of times we as parents need to invest in our children to give them that boundary so that when they do leave and set out on their own, that they're going to make those decisions that are going to be wiser than those who are foolish and going to get in trouble and have a miserable life. Really, it sounds strange, but we have to apply our wisdom daily. We have to really think about how we're interacting. And it's a learned process. It's not something that you just get all of a sudden. It's the process of growing wise is over time, over listening, reading the Psalms, and thinking about them. And that's why they wrote the Psalms the way they did, so that they were easy to teach young children. And that they had to memorize, by the time they were an adult, these were inside them. And most of the time, they were such central to who and the way they thought. They responded with proverbial wisdom, in a sense, I guess. They had that. So now we're going to talk about the virtuous wife in Proverbs 31. And it really does reflect more than just the wife, because it does also help to show the core of what we've been talking about when it comes to the family. We talked about it in the introduction, we looked at it, but King Lemuel is the one who wrote this. We, again, don't really know who he is. It's interesting that he apparently is taking this and writing it, and it's apparently come from his mother. It's something that he has learned, that he saw that happened. It's written in a format also that is acrostic. And what that means, again, is it's the first letter of the alphabet of the Hebrew. So the first sentence begins, that first word of the first sentence is the first alphabet. And each one of the verses there, and I just saw I got an error on my net. My projector, it says it's well, I lost the projector in here. But it's basically structured, and to me, it's very difficult if you're to think about take every letter in our alphabet and then write something in every sentence. The first word is the letter to the alphabet. Then the next sentence would be the next letter, that first word of the alphabet. Now, we don't see it because it's been translated, but it shows kind of the importance of how they wrote this. And so when we look at this idea of the Psalm 31 is really the cornerstone is the family. It's talking about the wife, but we can see a lot of stuff. So we're going to look, if you want to go and open up in your Bibles in Psalm 31, since I don't have the projector working, something happened. When it opens up, in just the first couple of verses, it says, an excellent wife who can find? For her worth is far above jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and she will have no lack of gain. He will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not evil all the days of her lives. So he describes this idea of an excellent wife, which really, the essence of that in the Hebrew is a woman of valor, a woman of strong courage, one who is excellent in the way that moral standards and everything. He also says that her value is immeasurable. You can't take her out of the equation, in other words. The impact of not having her is very detrimental to the entire family. And this is the idea of the relationship of the husband and the wife together and the children. We see that it's a mutual respect and trust, but it also in this proverb describes a lot of the different roles. And that's where we struggle today is roles. Roles as a husband, and a wife. And that's what is so ridiculous to me is because when people talk about trying to say somehow that women are demeaned in the Bible, I always tell them, go to Proverbs 31:10 and read it. And that is one powerful woman that is, and you look at the impact and the stuff she has. In 13 and 19 through 19, she works for wool. She looks for wool and flax and works with her hands in delight. She is like merchant ships. She brings her food from afar. She rises also while it is still night. She girds herself with strength and makes her arms strong. She senses that her gain is good. Her lamp does not go out at night. She stretches out her hands to the distaff, and her hands grasp the spindle. So what do we see about her? Resourceful. She's diligent. She's proactive, right? And she's a good steward. Every time I read this, I'm not knocking on my mom, but there's something, every time I read this about how busy they are, I think of my grandmother. Every time I would be over there, she was always busy, quilting, cooking, canning, giving stuff to people, doing things, And literally the last person up, I don't know when she went to sleep. And then same thing, first thing up in the morning. I just see that. And that to me had a big impact as I was growing up, and seeing that type of an example. And I never thought less of her than my grandfather. It never came up. That's why I say, the devil wants us to demean these relationships and just look at the power and the beauty, resourceful, diligent, proactive, and a good steward. Verse 20 and 21, and she extends her hand to the poor. She stretches out her hands to the needy. She is not afraid of the snow for her household are clothed with scarlet. She's compassionate, generous, and she's planning. She's looking in and she's planning. She's compassionate towards the poor, the needy, and again, this is a beautiful woman who is making a beautiful family. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them and supplies belts to tradesmen. It's not a stay-at-home mom, is it? No. No, not at all. Her strength and dignity are her clothing, and she smiles at the future. Positive, right? She smiles at the future. She opens her mouth in wisdom and teaches, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household. She does not eat the bread of idleness. What do you think that is? Bread of idleness? I know. It does. The computer system's working, so everybody on YouTube is getting to see it. And so, yeah, it's a bummer when it disconnects in the network because everybody here doesn't get to see it. Yeah. That's why I go ahead and continue to use it, because then it's at least showing. But thank you. Yeah. So what's idleness? To me is, the bread of idleness. Lazy. It's interesting it's described as bread, doesn't it? Bread of idleness. Sometimes I see these, you read it, and I love the wording because it's kind of a different description, but it's so appropriate. They're feeding upon, you see? They're feeding upon. That's where they're drawing energy from, is what? Lazy, idleness, doing nothing. That's also a good way to spiral into depression, honestly, is get caught into that, doing nothing and accomplishing nothing and then feeling like you're nothing, and then it's, that's kind of a lesson. But so what do we see in that grouping? We see diligent, influential, wise, and a mentor. This is one of the also most powerful things that moms can be to young ladies and to their sons, is in a sense a mentor them. Like I said, this is King Lemuel who's writing this, a man. And he received this from his mother, and he's writing this out. This is the impact that even this young king, when he was a boy, had. 28 through 31. Her children rise up and bless her, her husband also. He praises her, saying, many daughters have done nobly, but you excel them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord shall be praised. Give her the product of her hands. Let her works praise her in the gates. I wanted to mention that about the gates, talking about the husband being at the gates. And what he's saying is that basically the gates was like the city council. It's where the city hall, a place of power and authority, that this man, when he's down there, a part of his respect comes from his wife. Now, I have known some men who have had some terrible wives. And it has impacted the way I looked upon them because of the behavior of what their wife was doing. And it works kind of both ways, honestly. It does. But one of the aspects of this, and so, is the idea that, our spouses can glorify us or humiliate us and dishonor us as well. And this is the second time when it says about how this wife is actually giving, and he recognized that. Her husband also praises her. Husbands, let them know. Let them know that what they're doing is amazing. It's wonderful, and how important they are. And this ideal of the superficialness of a lot of times what people say is a beautiful wife, what does it say? Deceitful, beauty is vain. So we see one, she's industrial, she's industrious, she's faithful, and she's loved, and she's godly. So I think that one of the applications is for married and then for those as well, for us as again, like we kind of already talked about, the impact it has on the husband and the wife, and looking at this and how the two together being so different in their roles helps to honor and glorify each other through living a good, righteous life and honoring each other in those roles. And I think that this is a good one to study. Occasionally when I have talked to young couples, this is something that I come to and read. Not to shape the wife, future wife, but also the husband, to remind them that this is something that you have, that God is blessing you with, and you need to honor her, protect her, love her, and hold her up. And this is a part of what you need to do to protect your family. So it's a great one for us to sit and look at. And for families and communities, look at the impact that here is a wife that is having on the community, the businesses, the things that she's interacting with, the poor, the charitable things that she's doing. All that helps to make a community a better place. And so it has a great one. So now we're going to move over to the second part of this, wisdom and wealth and generosity and contentment, because I think that's the conflict we have is, what is wealth to you? Most people, what is valuable? What is wealth? How wealthy do you need to be before you're truly happy? Most people that have lived, long enough, they start to realize they keep chasing after that next raise, thinking, well, that's going to make it better. If I could just make this much, and then they start making that much, and are they happier? Not necessarily, no. What you end up doing, most people, is they start spending, right? You make more and go, oh, our lives could be so much better if I made $20 an hour. And you start making $20 an hour, guess what? You start spending $20 an hour. And you go, oh, if it was $25 an hour, start making $25 an hour, guess what? You start spending $25. So what is, when we look at wealth, it has a major impact on our contentment, right? And it starts, honestly, with honoring God with our wealth. It doesn't mean you set up a bank account, a 401k for God. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about honoring Him with what you do have. Not complaining about what you don't have. Maybe you got what you need. Maybe that's the problem comes back to what? Contentment. If you can't be happy where you're at, you're not going to be happy anywhere. That's kind of the thing. In Proverbs 3, 9, and 10. Honor the Lord from your wealth and from the first of all your produce, so your barns will be filled with plenty and your vats will overflow with new wine. That was one of the problems with the Israelis, is that the Hebrews, was that they felt like they had to build their house first. They had to have their retirement plans and take care of themselves, and they neglected the temple. And the Levites lived off of that. They depended on tithing. If you go back to the period of the Judges, you remember there was a a young priest who had to leave and go off because they were starving. The Levites were starving. And he ends up hired out as a priest, a personal priest to another man. Because why? Because of exactly this, that people weren't putting God first, whether it's in compassionate and helping others with what we have, or helping to make sure that God's work is being done. Say, well, the lights are on down at the building. The air conditioner's good. It's okay. I need it more. And honor the Lord from your wealth. God does not expect you to suffer. He does not. But one of the catches here, if you look at this, honor the Lord with your wealth and from the first of your produce. So what? So your barns will be filled with plenty and your vats will overflow with new wine. In Habakkuk, one of the things he says is, try to outgive me. Try to basically and see what happens. You give and you think you're going to suffer. No, I will bless you. I will fill your barns. Give God first. And then he says, I'll fill up the barns. Your vats are going to overflow. But we feel like some reason if we give our money to God, that I'm going to hurt. And this is the problem the Hebrews had, and a lot of the things that God judged them poorly for because of that. Proverbs 15:16. Better is a little with the fear of the Lord than great treasure with turmoil with it. It's better be a poor man that has fear for the Lord, in other words, than somebody who's real rich and comfortable and the turmoil that's going to come with it. So think about the Lord more. In other words, what he's talking about is the first portion, or not the last thing Sunday morning when the plate's coming around and you go, oh, I've done this. Look over at Suzanne and go, did you bring the checkbook? How much money do you have? Oh, let me look real quick. Is that putting the Lord first? No. But also do it purposely. Do it, to where you have a purpose of why you're doing it. Understand. And like the proverb writer says, give to the Lord and I guarantee you, he says, I'm going to take care of you. I will take care of you. That's hard. That's faith, isn't it? Yeah. That takes a lot of faith to say, let me give this $20, because why? We're chasing the next raise, aren't we? Well, I can barely make it at $15 an hour, and I'm going to give him $5 of that? Are you kidding me? Don't try to do the math and say I'm giving you a percentage, but no, we feel like I'm struggling now. Well, you know what? I'll give more when I make $25 an hour. What are we doing? And a lot of times it's the heart, honestly, in doing it. Why? Because it's greed. It comes back to it fundamentally when we're thinking like that is kind of a greedful thing that we have. And this is what the Proverb 11 says, 11:24 and 25. There is one who scatters and yet increases all the more. And there is one who withholds what is justly due, and yet its result is only in want. The generous man will be prosperous, and he who waters will himself be watered. In other words, you give, you will be given. You will be taken care of. That's God promising you. You can't outgive God. If he needed money, he'd make us a bank. So why does he want us to do that? I think it's to humble us and remember that everything is his to begin with. It's his. And he's providing for us. So you have to trust him, don't you? That I'm going to give to the Lord purposefully towards the Lord first. And I trust because he said it what? He said it right here. We just read it in the Proverbs. He said it all over the Bible. Seek first the kingdom of God, and then all these things will be added unto you. Sound familiar? What Jesus said in Matthew 6? Proverbs 23, 4 and 5. Do not weary yourself to gain wealth. Don't wear yourself out. Cease from your consideration of it. When you set your eyes on it, it's gone. For wealth certainly makes itself wings like an eagle that flies toward the heavens. Where did that check go? Last week's paycheck, Wow, it's gone. Don't worry yourself. Don't become so consumed with it because it changes our focus. It also changes your contentment, doesn't it? Your happiness. We become so worried sometimes about it that it hurts us. So some of the application is avoid prioritizing accumulating wealth over spiritual growth, okay? Over spiritual growth. Set boundaries. You're just driven toward the money and you forget about taking care of God's work and helping God. Because it's more than just keeping lights on, it's also benevolence. One of the biggest things we have as a group of Christians together, you read in the book of Acts, is about being able to take care of those who are in need and providing back to them and making sure that they don't become disadvantaged and they can't be taken care of the way they need to be. Proverbs 11:25, the generous man will be prosperous, and he who waters will himself be watered. The same thing. Generous, prosperous. But that's not the way that they say you build wealth in the world. We're focused and conditioned to where, no, you need to kind of be a little stingy and keep saving and investing, and there's nothing wrong with that either. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say don't be wise and have some security and everything. You're not saying that if you got money in the savings, you need to give it to God either. It's not teaching that as well. Proverbs 30:7-9. 2 things I ask of you. Do not refuse me before I die. Keep deception and lies from me. Give me neither poverty or riches. Feed me with the food that is my portion, so that I will not be full and deny you and say, who is the Lord? And that I will not become impoverished and steal and profane the name of the Lord. That's contentment, right? This is asking God, while I'm alive, one of the big things is just let me neither be poor or too rich, because they're both extremes. Give me what I need so that I'm satisfied. So when we apply this, is practice generosity, being generous. Pray for contentment and a balanced perspective on what we're seeing. And knowing that we need to honor God first is one of the big takeaways. Embrace generosity. It is really good to give. And don't give with the expectation to get it back.
That's right.
Okay? If you loan somebody money, loan it like you're giving it, okay? If they happen to come, that's another thing. Sometimes our generosity should not be contingent. It's without it. There's no strings attached. I'm doing this. Don't ever say, no, don't. If you need that money, honestly, you really do, don't do that. I mean, because to me, I've learned that lesson is just, if I've got it, I give it away. If I can, they need it, and it's gone.
Amen. That's right.
Because it'll destroy relationships. You end up with a master-slave relationship. Because that person's never going to look at you the same. Because they're going to be guilt-ridden because they didn't pay you back. Or you are going to always hold it over them emotionally and the way you react with them. And there will always be that stress there. Let it go. Give it if you have it. If you need it that bad, then don't. Okay? Don't do it. If they can pay you back, say, fine. That's the way I've learned. Fine. That's great. Great. But please, it's yours. Because I don't know how many times people have promised me, and we've had people travel through here at the church. Oh, I'll be right back. We'll come and we'll. And then you're all like, well, okay, they're going to give it back to me. And then they can't or they don't. And then there's that tension there, right? It's always there. We need to cultivate contentment. How do you do that? Is learn to be satisfied with what you got. And quit being consumed with what you don't have. Be happy. Be blessed. Remember, you've been blessed. So there's no assignment. We got one more lesson next week. But if you'd like, I read again, especially the Proverbs, this last chapter about looking at the proverbial wife. There's a lot that husbands we can learn from it. So I hope that you'll be able to join us next week for our final class in the book of Proverbs, this Sunday morning at 9:45 for Bible study, and then 10:45 for worship, 4 p.m. in the afternoon. So until we see you again, God bless.